Good morning, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's really a delight to be invited at one of the world's top 1%, I think, universities. How many people are here from Aalto? Well done. I think it's quite an accomplishment to create such a powerful research organization in such a short time. So the beginning of this, I would start with, is deepfake. I clearly feel like a deepfake myself, as I'm not a technologist, sitting here in front of a lot of brilliant minds of science and technology. I'm someone who likes to find people that are passionate about science and technology and connect them with capital. And what we do, my job is in private equity, so typically I come in a suit, so I'm fairly uncomfortable, but in this environment we thought we would skip it. Typically what we do is we try to find themes and then find specialist areas of expertise and then connect that with capital. So what I find particularly exciting about the Nordics and this particular conference is this combination of special expertise and the possibility to build an ecosystem that could be very unique in the world. So I'm here to present you my vision, which is for others to implement, but my vision for the Nordics would be essentially to create a Switzerland of data. And we'll get to that. But like Switzerland created an ecosystem of very interlocking complementarities that made its system for banking and wealth management flourish, I think there is a big potential for the Nordics to do the same thing now with a huge opportunity around AI. So we'll cover that. You know, what all does it take to build that ecosystem? But I'm delighted to be here. One of my life goals is to be in rooms where I am surrounded by people that are smarter than me, and I think I'm winning on this goal today. So before we get into the specifics, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fundamental things that create that ecosystem, any ecosystem really. I think it's around values, capabilities, and determination. And in the values, I want to take you back 100 years before we go forward, because most of today and tomorrow will be all about the future. But I want to take you back to almost 100 years ago with an English lord and professor of philosophy, Bertrand Russell, that some people, certainly smarter than I, think of as one of the grandfathers of computing, because he was one of the foundational people in philosophy of logic. So Nelson, if I can, let's have the first video.
One last question. Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned from it?
I should like to say two things. One intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this. When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you would wish to believe or by what you think could have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts. That is the intellectual thing that I should wish to say. The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say, love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, We have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things that we don't like. We can only live together in that way. And if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet.
So, progress based on facts and data and science, that will be the intellectual part that you will get plenty of today. And then the moral part, which is the values part, which is, I think, what's actually very unique about the Nordic ecosystem. And clearly, Bertrand's point also relates to peace, which I think will be a topic that will be covered quite a bit now with the defense conversations. So on the values part, I think that's the starting point in creating an ecosystem. And I think what you have in the Nordics is a value set around truth and trust that will become very important the more the world starts to depend on AI and the more things start getting more black boxy. Before my career in private equity, I worked for a systematic hedge fund. It was one of the most successful hedge funds in the history of the world, and they were extremely focused on integrity and values, partly because that is what allows you to feel comfortable with what you're doing when you're building a world where things are not so easy to understand and to appreciate, with a naked eye. So if you look at building now this, let's say, AI-led ecosystem in the Nordics, I think you start from the foundation of truth and trust. And I think that's something that the Nordics can really have a differentiating angle on. Then we go into the building of the actual solutions and so on, and that takes a few other elements. I'll start with energy, and I think maybe it's not going to be the major focus of this conference, but energy, this is pure energy, I think that seems to be in abundance here, and that's something that is obviously a very big part of creating a more data center-led infrastructure for the ecosystem here. So I hear there's plenty of not just renewable, but also nuclear energy, and that's a necessary component. Then we go into compute and computing power, and I guess folks after me, IQM, will talk a lot about quantum computing, and I just had the pleasure of seeing a little quantum chip right before in the speaker's lounge. I think that's going to be an area that is going to be very important for the Nordics and for Finland, how to develop compute power. To be fair, at the moment, Europe, including the Nordics, is not leading in the race in terms of acquiring compute power compared to, for example, the US and China. So the way that I think about that is you want to have the ecosystem so that you can bring the folks who are expending an enormous amount of dollars into compute power, the hyperscalers, into your ecosystem. And you're already starting that, Google Cloud and so on, building data centers in Finland. And then once you have the data center and you have the compute power, then you have the downstream, all the application world. And that's where the application world, what do you do with the data, how do you analyze it? That's where all the tremendous opportunities are for everybody here to build essentially the front end to like the matrix, so to speak. And that opportunity is where my thesis is figuring out what's true from what's not is going to become a much bigger part of the opportunity. So it is this black box element that I referred to before, that is going to make it a lot more complicated for all of us to understand, what can we depend on in terms of analysis? What can we depend on in terms of our view of truth? Which is why I thought to start the conference with a video from Bertrand Russell, because essentially he's the philosopher he lived his life in search of truth. And it's going to be an incredibly challenging aspect. You will all have seen a number of the proliferation of social media and deepfakes. I've selected one video for that, which just makes the point. So Nelson, can we go with the second video?
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
So this is, there's like dozens of those, but essentially the point is, as we go into this world where all of the basic decision-making that is algorithmic will be done essentially behind, and it's not going to be like as transparent as it has historically been, figuring out, I think, the truth becomes a huge challenge. I was at a conference earlier in the summer, Super Return, which is a classic big private equity conference. The most exciting part that I had there in terms of people speaking was the head of the European Space Agency. And I grabbed it to him afterwards and we were chatting. And I was explaining how I feel like organizations like the European Space Agency have now a holy obligation, almost like a holy challenge, to be the purveyors of truth in this world where now you can have multiple versions of analysis going out and what is real. So organizations like this university that are focused on science and technology, I think we're going to have this opportunity to be the defenders and the promoters of truth. And if I were to make one call, I would like to say that in 10 years, I would expect that there's going to be an entire segment called Truth Tech to try to figure out what is going to be, to try to figure out across business, societal applications, government, how to figure out what's real from what's misleading. And so I would love to come back here 10 years from now when we're going to be on the 13th edition of NORDEEP and see actual workshops happening with truth tech companies being founded out of the Nordics. So I think the opportunity here is great to own an ecosystem from the data centers all the way to the applications. You have a lot of what it takes. There's elements that you need to build. I'm sure IQM will cover part of that as we go through. So I hope you can go forth and create deep and meaningful work. Thank you very much.